This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, have you got yourself a PR podcast plug yet? You know, at the top of every show, we like to plug a passion project of PR people who listen to the show. They write in and tell us what they're doing, right? And this is your side hustle. This is the thing that you dig. It doesn't necessarily make you money. It can, right? But it can be your book, it can be your blog, it can be your e-newsletter. It's not the thing that gets you your paycheck every week. It's something that you just do because you love it, right? So send us a DM on Twitter at the PR Podcast and let us plug your passion project in an upcoming episode. We're also always looking for guests for our show. So if you wanted to be featured as a guest, send us a DM at the PR Podcast as well. We get lots of people, you know, and I'm so grateful that when I started this a couple of years ago, I was just kind of calling up my friends and saying, hey, you want to be on a podcast? You want to talk about what you do all day? And we get people now sending us notes on Twitter, pitching us ideas, pitching us guests. And we're so grateful for that. That's what makes this show work. I've said before that I like to bring people, interesting people onto the show and have interesting conversations about them, about what we do, which is how we make news work. Whether it's PR people working for clients, we've had SEO experts on, we've had videographers, photographers, editors, reporters, you name it. So if you have a role in the news making business, or if you work with clients and you try to get their message out in some way, shape, or form, we want to hear from you. So send us a DM on Twitter at the PR Podcast. You follow us, we'll follow you, and we'll make sure that we get you on as a guest in the future. Now, let's get to our conversation with this week's guest. Cormac Clarke is a senior digital PR specialist at Tank PR in the UK. He's a former football journalist, and we're not talking American football, kids, who is a lover of a good data-led PR campaign. Tank PR uses public relations, social media, SEO, and digital PR to create great profiles for clients. But the story that makes this work always comes first. He's a proud Irishman who broke his mom's heart moving to England, but I'm sure she still talks to you, Cormac. Welcome to the PR Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jody. Pleasure to be here.
So let's address the elephant in the room. Ted Lasso, American football, European football. We're talking about European football here, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a guilty pleasure of mine, to be honest. I absolutely love it.
Tell us about your journalism career there. You said you combined two of your passions, your love of journalism and your love of football, to pursue a career there?
Yeah. So when I was about 15 years of age, firstly, I've supported my local football team, my local soccer team for the American listeners, pretty much since the age of 4 or 5. And as I started studying journalism at school, I just, I found a love for it, really. So as I got older, I was reading these soccer blogs and these football blogs, and I just thought, well, I can do that. So I just, it pretty much started as just going to the game and taking a pen and notepad with me, and doing a match report, and I would go home that night, type it up and post it online, and that's pretty much where it started, to be honest. I got basically the PR person from the football club seen my match reports and asked me to write for the club website. And yeah, it pretty much just spiraled from there. I just loved football and loved journalism, and thought I would try and combine the two.
I love that. It's sort of a self-starter kind of a thing there, and walked your way into a job. Now, how did you go from doing that job and being a journalist covering sports to what you do now with Tank PR? Where did that crossover happen?
I moved to England in 2018 to study at university. I studied broadcast journalism. I found out pretty quickly that I didn't have the face for TV or the voice for radio. So throughout my time at university, I just kind of decided that being on TV wasn't really what I wanted to do. And so I started looking at what I could do with the skills, that I'm being taught, that I'm learning. I didn't want all my money to go to waste on a university degree that I'm not going to use. So yeah, I started in my final year of university. There was a PR module to our course, and yeah, I loved every minute of it. So, and I just kind of thought, well, okay, I may not want to be on TV, but there is something that I could use those skills for, and yeah, I sort of fell into PR, as it were.
That's great. That's great. Now, tell us a little bit about what you do with Tank PR. It sounds like it's very heavily invested in the digital side of things, right?
So actually, as traditionally as an agency, Tank is a traditional PR agency. Digital PR now is something that's just been offered in the past few years. Yeah, and it's something that I'm really excited to be a part of, because we're, as a department within the agency, we're growing. But yeah, so I'm essentially, like I said, I'm a senior digital PR specialist. Tank is one of the top 150 PR agencies in the UK, according to PR Week. And yeah, in my role, I work with clients to create newsworthy content, drive brand awareness, and increase traffic, essentially back to our clients' website. And we do that through links and coverage on media publication websites. So, I mean, if you want to look at it in a sort of simplistic way, I guess we help to get our clients seen online, essentially.
Yeah, it's a very strategic type of PR, and a lot of what we talk about here on the show is what we think of as maybe traditional earned media, right? News releases and story pitches and working with reporters. But there is this other side of PR that you are invested in, which is what you just described, sort of creating content that also carries the link back to where that client lives, right? Is there a sort of a formula that you use and how you do that, or maybe are there some sort of vehicles that you use, rinse and repeat style, to actually get that job done?
No, not really. I think every client's different as well, so it's not really a one size fits all approach. Every client's going to want something different. Every client will have their own KPIs in terms of what they want from us. But no, I mean, essentially digital PR, it's a blend of, we use elements of PR as well. So we're still writing those news releases. We're still doing all that good stuff from PR. It's the difference is there is that technical side of it as well. We're just trying to get that content online, and like you say, get it get people back to where our client lives.
Are there besides the actual owned properties of the client, are there other places that you are publishing some of this content? I mean, are you going on, let's say, a Reddit, or are you going on other places that aren't owned by the client, or are you posting this content in places that the client owns, like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever?
No, so in terms of how we create campaigns, we may create own content, so that'll be maybe a blog on the client's website, and then what we would tend to do then is we create a press release, and send that out to media, essentially. And within that release, we'll have links back to the client's websites, and essentially that's how we get the reader of the publication. So essentially, we want the journalist or the reporter to include that link in the release, which they don't always do, which is fine. But that's essentially what our goal is, because we want to get as many people as possible back to their client's website.
Yeah, that is sort of the holy grail, one of the holy grails, right, of working with a journalist, is actually getting them to include the link back to the client, whether it's the website or a social media platform or whatever. And it's, in my experience, it's somewhat rare to be able to do that. I think that most news organizations, and I want to hear your perspective on this, most news organizations want to keep you on their website. So rather than link back to a client's website, they'll link to other stories about that client on their website, right? Are there ways that the word incentivize comes to mind, but are there ways you encourage, I guess, journalists to actually include that backlink to a client property versus something that still lives on their website?
Um, again, it's not sort of one approach fits all. It completely depends on the content itself. I mean, at the end of my press releases, for example, if it's, I tend to include a link for more information. So in terms of it's informative for the reader to visit this website. Essentially, that's the approach I usually try and take. But no, I mean, I do know what you mean. I've came across those websites that only sort of internally link. But yeah, don't get me wrong, coverage is brilliant for the client as well. You've that brand awareness aspect of it as well. Again, it's going back to what the client wants from us. Do they want the brand? Do they want brand awareness? Do they want the links coming through? There's definitely different elements to it. But no, I mean, in my experience, I think if a reporter or a journalist does cover the story and our client is wanting links as in terms of as a priority, I'll follow back up the journalist, thanking them for covering the story in the first place. But I'll just I'll try and look more, I guess, in a more forward way, just saying, would you mind including the link? It'd be informative. It'd be informative for your readers to read more on this. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely different tactics we can use, but yeah, that's I guess that's the incentive, really.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's providing value, like you said, to the journalist, and providing value to the audience that the journalist is serving, right? I found sometimes that maybe not linking directly back to the homepage of the client, but maybe a specific piece of content on the client's website that supports the article, like you said, for more information, click here. You go to a white paper, you go to an expanded blog, you go to some other kind of post that supports the pitch and the story that you're asking the journalist to write. And like you said, it never hurts to ask, right? All they can really say is no.
Yeah, I mean, I've been told from a pretty early age my own dad, he said, if you don't ask, you don't get. And that's, to be honest, that's, I'm fairly sure he wasn't talking about digital PR when I was a young kid when he was telling me that, but it's something I've tried to carry into my job anyway.
Absolutely. And it segues nicely into the way that we found each other, because I saw a Twitter thread that you posted a little while back that I thought that really hit home for me, because I think we've all, as PR people, we've all had a little bit of these experiences. And I'm going to jump on here and read a little bit of this thread. You started out by saying, seeing a lot of PR hate rearing its ugly head again from some journalists in the last few days. So I thought I'd put a few pieces of advice together. And these are kind of like experiences. And I'm reading through these and I'm going, oh, that's me. Oh, that's me. So maybe if I could read some of these off and I can sort of get your reaction to it. Number one, you say, we have a job to do. You're talking about PR people, right? And number one, and you're addressing journalists here. So number one, we have a job to do. We're trying our best. If you're a food writer and receiving Love Island releases, fair enough. Send an email back asking to be removed from, the distribution list. But coming on Twitter to embarrass someone for a few retweets doesn't give you the high moral ground. And I love that. Tell us a little bit about what inspired that the first item in that thread.
Yeah, so I'm sure you're aware it's something that seems to be pretty common now in terms of some journalists coming on, using social media platforms like Twitter to complain about receiving emails from PRs, and I get it's completely born out of frustration, but it's pretty much what I've said in the first line. We have a job to do. Do you know what I mean? I get journalists have immense amount of pressure coming from their editors and higher up the chain for stories, and it's not too dissimilar for PRs. We have managers to satisfy. We've more importantly, we've got clients that that are demanding as well. I'm certainly not in a bad way, But yeah, I think in the past couple of weeks I've just seen it sort of come to the top of it more. I was seeing more and more screenshots of emails and stuff, and it just wasn't. It just wasn't really good to see, because like I say, the first time we have a job to do just as much as them.
Yeah, it's not very kind, right? And I got to imagine that in the amount of time that anyone would take to screenshot an email that irked them and write a tweet and post it, they could have just as easily emailed directly back and say, please take me off your distribution list or don't send me anything anymore. Or they could just in the background just blacklist us and they'd never get anything from us again. So yeah, I got to agree with you. Operate with kindness as opposed to anger. And it's because it's very easy to operate out of anger, especially on social media. And so I agree with you. If we all just respect each other in the job that we're doing, and just be kind about it. Item number 2 in your thread, you write that we will follow up emails. Believe it or not all journalists work the same day and hours. My email could go unseen if I don't follow up. I totally agree with you, Cormac. I would say 40% of the coverage I get comes from this. I would venture a guess, for me, almost 50, really. You've got to follow up, and you continue to write here. If someone's opened my email 15 times with no response, I'm following up. I follow up regularly. I want to get your responses to this. I've even had journalists say, when you send me an email, then text me, because I'm getting 150 of these a day. If you follow up your email, it's going to go to the same place that your first email went to. And I want to hear from you. So text me and just say, hey, I just sent you an email. Then I'll go look for your email. What's your experience there?
Yeah, so again, most of my communication with journalists has been mostly over email, so I couldn't speak to sort of the mobile communications too much. I mean, I find that it's a lot easier to get hold of a journalist's email address rather than their phone number. I personally find, but just sort of touching on what we just spoke about, I think, I don't just want this to be, this isn't about this entire thread. I suppose it's not about bashing journalists. If anything, far from it. I think it's just about, I think that we need to sort of strengthen that relationship between PRs and journalists, not so much chipping away at it. Because, something that actually surprised me was, I mean, I certainly wasn't expecting the tweet to go as wide ranging as it did. But I mean, I had some journalists at national UK publications that were national newspapers here in the UK that were retweeting it as a journalist themselves, sort of arguing our case, as it were, just saying that it costs nothing to be nice, etc. And so I do need to stress, it's far from it. It's not all journalists. And I mean, I've never worked as a national journalist myself, but I get that it's all born out of frustration. I mean, if I was getting emails every day that were completely irrelevant, I'm sure I'd be a bit annoyed as well. So again, I think there's certainly a responsibility on the PR side as well, for us to make sure our distribution lists are as tight as it can be, make sure the content that we're sending is relevant, and basically that we're not peeing off journalists on a regular
basis. Exactly right. I think you end up this thread here with 5 tweets in total, and the last one you say is probably the most important one. Give us a break. And I think that's where we kind of started this thing off, which is, we respect them. They have a job to do. They need to respect us. We have a job to do. And if that kindness flows both ways, then I think everything gets done and gets done well. I mean, I'll admit that there are some things that I send out to journalists, releases and things like that, I know aren't the strongest thing. They're solid, but they're not the strongest thing. And so I'm not really going to follow up that hard on them. Then there are other pitches and story ideas, and I'm like, this is a good story. This is a good idea. All I got to do is find the right reporter who wants to do this, who's got enough bandwidth, right? Who gets the vibe of the story the way I'm getting the vibe of the story and says, oh yeah, I can do that. And so those are the ones that I'm going to follow up on. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're always going to believe in the content that you're writing. But yeah, again, like you just touched on, it's about getting those distribution lists right for that piece of content that you're writing. I will try my very best not to, sure, we'll have maybe a master distribution list for a certain client or a certain industry, but for every new campaign that we do or every new piece of content that I write, I'm building a media list specifically for that content. Sure, I may dip in and out of others that I think might be relevant, and go into previous content that I've written. I'll maybe go to journalists or publications that I've gotten coverage from before, and it's a similar style story, and that's another way in terms of how I'll build my media lists. But yeah, again, it's just about, like you touched on, finding the right journalist, writing the right content for the right journalist, essentially.
If you could hone in on sort of one thing that you do regularly when you're pitching out journalists, whether you're sending them a release, that understandably looks like it's going to a lot of people, or you're sending an individualized pitch, is there one kind of thing that you like to do, or maybe one or two things that you like to do that really sort of get a reaction from a journalist? Is it the length of the pitch? Is it the links that you send? Is it the added content like the video or the photo, or there's something that you like to do in there?
Yeah, so I mean, I wrote a blog piece on one of my previous jobs on crafting like the perfect PR, sort of the perfect outreach email, as it were. And yeah, I think it's just about making sure the content's making sure the journalist has everything they need within that email. And I know that may seem blindingly obvious, but the last thing a journalist wants is they have to take time out of their day, which, journalists are time poor. I think you hear that quite a lot. The last thing a journalist wants to do is to get in touch with you because you've forgotten, or you haven't included this piece of information, or you haven't included an image to go along with the piece, or blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot, I think, that can be said for the outreach email. I think making sure that it's relevant and that all the detail is there. Basically, give it to the journalist on a plate. And yeah, I think that's pretty much. I think spend time getting your outreach email right. I think is pretty much your best chance.
Fantastic advice. I love it. Well, Cormac, we're going to now segue into the rapid fire question portion of our podcast. If you've listened to the show, you know what's coming here. So this is where we steal a page from inside the actor studio and ask our guests a series of rapid fire questions. These meant to elicit a simple answer, maybe a laugh or two, hopefully more than one laugh. So with your indulgence, here we go. Now we got to put a disclaimer on this. We got to hang a UK context around your answers here. So, so American listeners, pay attention here. Here we go. Rapid fire question number one. Cormac, what is your favorite news source?
The Guardian newspaper. I would probably say, yeah. I'm trying to keep these as brief as possible.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You can elaborate if you want to. And newspaper versus broadcast. I mean, I'm sure you're consuming both, but is print sort of your go-to?
Yeah, I would read more print, or certainly the digital platforms of those publications, more than I'd watch broadcast news.
Good stuff. Rapid fire question number two. What is your favorite social media platform?
I would say LinkedIn, and which, it wasn't always the case, but I think when I came out of university, I started trying to build up my profile in terms of looking for jobs, and yeah, LinkedIn was the go-to.
I find that LinkedIn, my impression of LinkedIn is kind of the platform you want it to be. Twitter is the Associated Press news feed for me. It's just like information, constant. Instagram is, pictures and vacations and things like that. TikTok is whatever the heck TikTok is. But, and Facebook, I don't know who even goes there anymore. But to me, LinkedIn can be like all of those things and none of those things. And it can be your resume if you want it to be, and it can be something completely different if you want it to be. I find it to be a really interesting platform. I agree with you. Rapid fire question number three, because sorry, these are not my questions. These are yours. Rapid fire question number three, coffee or alcohol?
That's a no-brainer. That won't surprise many American listeners that the Irish guys saying alcohol. Yeah, I mean, a pint of Guinness over a cup of coffee any day of the week.
Love it. Rapid fire question number four. What is your favorite on the run food?
Oh, God. Fish and chips. Chip shop chips. So the UK thing, but yeah, fish and chips, I would say.
Love it. Love it. All right. And rapid fire question number 5. What do you want to be after you finish this career?
I mean, I kind of have this goal of, once I retire, I would love to open up my own bar, my own pub someday. And yeah, whether that be back home in Ireland, or I quite like the idea of retiring to somewhere sunny, somewhere like Spain or somewhere like that, and open up like an Irish pub on the Spanish coast somewhere. I think that'd be quite nice.
That would work. You let me know when that happens. I will visit.
I'll get you there.
Cormac, this has been a great conversation. Let people know how they can find you online.
Yeah, so you can get me on Twitter. Probably the best one to contact me on. It's Cormac Clarke PR. And yeah, that's probably the best way to get in touch.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again, Cormac. And thank you everyone for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the PR Podcast, and send us a question or a comment. Our intro is by Christopher Apple. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out there and hire him for all your photography needs. You can find me online at Jody Fisher on all the socials and on the web at jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.